Hey, all. Wanted to go over some of the popular lineup optimizers out there and give my 2 cents on on each one. Um, Fantasy Cruncher, for those of you who are subscribers, has gone down yesterday and like a week or two ago, and a bunch of people are freaking out. Obviously, it does suck, and I feel your pain. But one thing I do is I have backup optimizers that I subscribe to, and I know not everyone can do that, has the capabilities to do that. But for those of you who do, and if you play at high enough volume, you should probably do the same. And so I just wanted to go give like a brief overview of a few of them. So on each of these sites, they have their own tutorials and hundreds of videos on how their product works. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details here, because you could just go to their sites or their YouTube pages or whatever, and check them out. But this is probably more for newer players, or people who are just completely unfamiliar with the other optimizers out there. So the kind of the most popular, I'm guessing, I don't know the stats, but I'm assuming the most popular optimizer is Fantasy Cruncher. So we'll go over that first. I'd like to know what their market share is. It'd be interesting to see. It does seem like when they go down before a lock that there's less entries in some of the tournaments. And you could definitely tell that some people who run in lineup trains, who definitely wouldn't normally be running lineup trains, it's happened to me. So I'd like to see what percentage of the field uses which site. That'd just be interesting to find out. But I think it's Fantasy Cruncher, and for good reasons. They are I would say, gold standard, even though it sucks that they've gone down the last couple of weeks. They have the easiest interface to use. This is probably their coolest feature, is you could just cut and paste right from your spreadsheets into Fantasy Cruncher. The projections, none of the other ones, as far as I can tell, have that. They have a ton more customizable features. And not only are they customizable, they're pretty easy and intuitive to use. And they do provide projections, but I say this on every site, so it's no. I'm not putting them down. I would try to make my own. I think you could make it. You can make your own and make them a little more accurate. And it's also I think it's probably quicker for how much it optimizes, how quickly it optimizes. Given also that you can do so many more constraints and stacks and add in your own data too, which I don't think any other site does. So when fantasy, now here's the thing about your process that you have to keep in mind too. So I guess I'll give some advice in this as well as just review these briefly. Is if you have some sort of Fantasy Cruncher process where you have all this data that you're uploading, and into their advanced, I showed this tab really, my data tab. That I know a lot of people do this, and let's just say you have a whole bunch of constraints and groups added in. It's going to be tough to transfer that over to any other optimizer. That's just the way it is right now. Fantasy Cruncher is the gold standard, and they have the most options, and it's going to take you 40 minutes to figure out how to do something like that on another optimizer, or it just won't even be possible. So I would have, not only would I have a backup, I would have a process for that backup, something simpler. So let's just go into the next two sites. So the sites off the top of my head are, Fantasy Cruncher. Roto Grinders has a Lineup Optimizer. It used to be free, and I believe now you have to pay for it. I'm subscribed, so I don't know. Daily Roto, and I think the one that Sahil Sud co-founded or whatever. I can't remember what it's called. Lineup HQ or something. I don't know. I can't remember what it was called. And then the last one is Fantasy Labs. I haven't used Fantasy Labs in a long time. I never subscribed to Sahil's. So the other two I'll go over are Roto Grinders and Daily Fantasy. So the first difference is, like I said, the coolest thing about Fantasy Cruncher is you can cut and paste right from Excel. That saves you so much time. And in Roto Grinders, you have to go over here to upload projections. You download this file for whatever slate you're trying to do, and then it's going to come up with a let's see, maybe I could bring it up for you guys. Oops, there it is. Let's bring it over. So it'll come up with this, and what you need to do is a VLOOKUP function. Maybe this is getting a little too into the weeds, but you would paste highlight your projections, and you would do a VLOOKUP function of the player, and then you would, let's just say the info is here. You could find VLOOKUP anywhere. Anyways, and then you would put this function into the fantasy points column, and so cut and paste your info all the way down this list and upload it. Now here's what the problem is not all sites use the same player names, right? So like RJ Barrett might be the letter J space Barrett, or R period J period Barrett. I've even seen like RJ period Barrett, or like a DeAndre Hunter might have an apostrophe. So pay attention to those changes, and if you do plan on having two sites, you can make a player name list beforehand that can quickly match your backup optimizer, and then adjust accordingly. So if the one site has the DeAndre Hunter, then you make sure that that's quickly easily changeable, and then you can upload. If your optimizer of choice goes down 15 minutes, you're not going to be scrambling as much. So that's the big hurdle right off the bat, is the names. The other part for NBA, it's not that huge. I'm on NHL because, NHL, MLB, NFL, stacking is so huge. But for Roto Grinders, they've actually gotten a little better. Not a little better, a lot. They've improved a lot over the last couple years, I think. And I admittedly don't use them a ton because I use Fantasy Cruncher. But it looks like you can stack fairly easily on here without too much trouble. So, that's something to keep in mind. And they've added late swap to Lineup HQ. And let's see if they have it on NBA. I already checked they do, but just to show you, they got late swap on the NBA as well. So another thing they don't have that a lot of people use now on Fantasy Cruncher is randomness, which they're calling range of outcome. They have the traditional randomness and not the normal distribution randomness that Fantasy Cruncher offers. And they're not going to have you're not going to have a My Data tab to upload to customize your crunches, your optimizations. They're not going to have a ton of the features, but they have enough where, especially if it's your backup. But in the NBA, and they have player groups here, right? So the group settings, they don't have auto group creator like Fantasy Cruncher does. Again, another benefit that Fantasy Cruncher offers, especially in football. But they do have player groups and randomness, unique players, and minimum amounts of salary exposure if you want. So, I would say you're not going to lose a ton, especially if this is going to be your backup site. You should consider it. They're definitely upgrading this. Daily Roto here. I don't know, where am I at? Daily Roto is it's pretty similar to the Roto Grinders interface, where to upload you're gonna have to let's see if this pops up. Do the similar thing you see in the bottom left corner here, where you have to choose a template, match up your names to their names, and then upload. It has it does have late swap. It has this shuffle feature, which is interesting. You could Google it. They have a YouTube video on it. And volatility, and I believe volatility is just your classic randomness, but shuffle is like a proprietary feature that they have that I think literally shuffles the players up. They have uniques, which is what you need, and then they do have some additional settings that Roto Grinders doesn't have, but it's kind of just your cookie cutter. Your cookie cutter optimizer. It'll get the job done, especially for the NBA. I have not tried their stacking feature. And so if you're going to use this one as your backup and you are into NHL, MLB, or NFL, you're going to want to check and double check how their stacks work. See it. Okay, it does look like they have stacks. Let's see. I'm not going to go through it all here, but okay. So they do have stacking. I don't know how accurate it's going to be. Let's find out. Why not? 20 lineups, we could do it. So stacking is what would make me the most worried. But listen, if you play NHL, for example, and you play at a high volume, you need a backup site. You just have to, and if it is part of your, job, I'm not a CPA, but you should be able to write off the extra cost anyways. So if you're going to have to pick a site, you need to pick one that has stacking options, even if they're not as good as Fantasy Cruncher. And I did try Roto Grinders stacking, and it's not as customizable, but it works. It'll get the job done. So if you can throw that in there, if 10 minutes left when your optimizer goes down, you could shoot on over to Roto Grinders and pop it in. It's worth whatever, they're $30 or whatever they charge. So I don't know if let's see, we did 20 lineups and it took them a couple minutes here. That's that. I mean, the Fantasy Cruncher stacking on hockey is pretty slow as well, so I wouldn't judge based off of this. Roto Grinders actually was pretty quick. Let's just do a quick. I didn't do this before today, but if you do stacks, you just do 100% 3 forward stacks, and let's do nothing crazy. Let's try around 50 lineups. Let's see how fast it goes. Okay, so all right, I did this with with very little randomness and I think very little uniques, but it does look like it did make proper stacks. Proper forward stacks. You'd have to go through and double check. Okay. And you could already see it looks like Roto Grinders optimization is a little quicker than Daily Roto for hockey. Yeah, they're going to finish this out. So you could get, this is pretty fast, honestly. 52 stacks of 3x3s. That's pretty quick. That is pretty quick. You do, I mean, I need the customization. A lot of you probably do that Fantasy Cruncher has. So, I still, even though that speed is nice to look at right now, I still probably wouldn't switch over to making this my primary. But you can argue that Roto Grinders has improved their product quite a bit. But in summation, the point I was really trying to drive home here is if you can afford a backup, how about this too? If you have a Excel, this is what we all did, 5-6 years ago. We had our own optimizers on Excel. We built those little solver optimizers. Look into those. I'm sure there's free ones out there. If you can't afford a backup site, just have something like that ready to go where you can optimize on Excel and at least just get 150 lineups in there or 20 lineups, whatever you do. Or if you even do optimize to make a cash lineup, you get something in there. That would be the least best option, and then the better options would be picking between one of these two or the other three that I haven't, or the other two that I haven't gone over, and making that your primary backup. Get familiar with it, especially for your specialty sport, and then when shit hits the fan, you're ready to switch over and actually possibly get an edge on the people who don't do this. If this happens, let's say it happens like 5 times a year for each optimizer. Well, the people who use Roto Grinders, they're screwed 5 times a year, but you're not. The people who use Fantasy Cruncher are screwed 5 times a year, but you're not. People who use Daily Roto, right? So like 15 times a year, you're the one who's getting the edge. That's pretty huge. Just that simple thought. So definitely check them out. I am by no means an expert on the other two. I'm pretty good with Fantasy Cruncher, but like I said, you don't need to ask me. There is a ton of good resources out there. Manny Laura's Twitch has a ton, and Fantasy Cruncher's own video page has a ton, and I know Daily Roto has a bunch of tutorials, and Roto Grinders has their own webpage. I mean, their own YouTube channel. So you guys all know that. All right. Any questions? Let me know, and have a good one.